Some in the distant right are excited over the prospects of newly invented technological solutions. They see the potential in genetic engineering, for example, to modify their own race, to create a nation that has little possibility of liberal, out-group-centric currents from emerging on the basis that political beliefs are in some measure heritable. The surveillance state, the smart city, could be used to target subversive thought, and so on. They look upon this technological arms race with glee, like a settler gazing upon an undeveloped plot of fertile land. The technocratic arms race is seen by them as less of a danger and more like an opportunity. But every arms race presents to us a choice. I believe that the only proper choice for the right is to refuse this hypothetical atom bomb and withdraw. Arms races have historically been antagonistic to traditional conservative values. When one takes advantage of a new development, whatever has been taken necessarily affects the user, according to the functions and properties of that thing. Finance is one such example. The right of the past, monarchies, believed that they could benefit from the rise of financial technique and the productive technique of capitalism. The result of this was not the enhancement of the regime's values, but rather the enslavement of the state to international finance and the consequent dissolution of those values. This occurred in Bismarck's Germany, and the tale of finance's stranglehold on the monarchies of that era is well known. When the development is technological, the degree to which this affects its user is even greater. Take, for instance, modern boats or the airplane, which have allowed the mass movement of people across space and across borders. The adoption of advanced transport technology was necessary to aid in logistics and warfare, but its effect has been the gradual erasure of boundaries and the intermixing of peoples. What was once local became globally accessible, and regionalism itself went on the decline. The problem grows to a gargantuan extent when technology becomes capable of changing the biological makeup of man. Genetic engineering threatens to make the boundaries between races totally obsolete, and it makes completely arbitrary the possession of qualities by a particular group. It undermines the nation-state by eliminating shared biology as a criterion, leaving only shared history. But that history becomes arbitrary too, since test tube babies are only the machination of modern scientists at a far advanced moment in time, not a conquest gained in war or a common interest forged in the lineage of history. Civilization, thus, is not a product of a people's civilizing qualities, but rather an arbitrary choice by power. The existence of the white race becomes not a historically necessary fact, but instead a choice which can be made actively by a small group of technocrats. This reduction of something innate and objective, race, to a technical choice becomes merely a product of subjective and sociological power relations. The right would hence be required to adopt a postmodern reductionism of race to power. Bioengineering leg sweeps away the very foundation of right-wing thought, transforming the objectivity of historical reality into a subjectivism of will, which is far more flexible and unstable than history or Darwinian evolution. Race, under normal historical circumstances, is rather invincible. Since it is the domain not of man, but of nature, it has a certain degree of unalterability. But make race the product of man, and we run into a serious problem. Man is flexible. Nature may be immune to conquest and propaganda, but man is not. The power elite who control genetic engineering may be subverted, the right may lose control of the technology. When our guys are absent at the workbench, then there is nothing remaining to preserve the race. When you accept the quote-unquote atom bomb, and when you decide to join the arms race quote-unquote for the benefit of the nation, the effect is to enchain yourself to global necessity. Just as the monarchical arms race led European states to adopt finance and capitalism, the technological arms race will force the right to de facto accept the postmodern paradigm, if not its morality, and eventually much worse. All of this talk of utilizing genetic engineering from a right-wing perspective is pure fantasy. We do not control the material underpinning of the scientific state. The global financial elite does. Since we don't have this control, and since they will use their newfound technological prowess to erase us, it necessitates that we take up a voice against the encroachment of technology. Even if we were to view this in a Machiavellian sense, there is no way the rise of this technology benefits us. Even if we were hypothetically in control of it, the situation would still be dire. The right would not be able to control technology because technological society is a monism, as Jacques Ellul exposed in his writings. Its end is to expand, nothing more. When technology is accepted, its end is to be used to its maximal extent. The intervention of morality is nothing compared to the metaphysical and teleological reality of technique, which is just as true here as it is in power, the latter according to Bertrand de Jouvenel. Those who wish to limit power by availing themselves of it, the common fallacy of the revolutionary, only serve to grow it. They might put it to their own ends for a time, but the allure of power and the arbitrariness of self-will combine to overpower any degree of reluctance. Since the form of technology alters the will of the controller, and since the end of technology is growth and its maximal utilization, whoever becomes its master is at once its abettor and slave. Technology grows to the extent that it becomes a singularity. The end of it is the replacement of mankind, just as the end of power is the complete elimination of human autonomy and decentralization or regionalism. Alongside the desire to join the arms race for self-benefit, some of the dissident right have sought to become the new globalists. They fantasize about creating a white globalism, using biotechnology to whitewash the world. Again, this is another fallacy of the revolutionary, to desire to become the master rather than to become free from his dominion. Global power carries the same risk as technological power. Global power, like the technocrats who administrate over technology, can be subverted and it can become corrupt. Over generations, the values that once dominated can dissolve away. When global power becomes corrupt, the world becomes corrupt. A regional power may become corrupt as well, but the damage this can cause to the social order as a whole is limited. The conflict possible between regions means that there is a way out of it, but if global power becomes corrupt, and if everyone is dependent upon this global power to survive and rule, then everyone must submit to its error. We must recall once again de Juvenal's observation: the end of power is to maximally grow, and I would add that its end is the complete collapse of human autonomy and difference. Difference is what defines nations, differences in biology, culture, and history. So to submit to the Minotaur, the continual growth of power, is the elimination of the nationalism that the dissident right cherishes. Adopting global power makes whoever does so identical to the corrosive force that is currently destroying borders and nations. Giving up is not the same as winning. Needless to say, the essence of global power is anti-traditional when it takes a human or an inverted form. God created peoples diverse, and those diverse peoples made nations. To reduce them to a biomass, whether it's white or not, is fundamentally rebellion against the natural law. Eurasianists will object that their particular brand of globalism or imperialism is multipolar and essentially multi-ethnic, and so it is not theoretically at odds with natural law. But Dugin does not have an answer as to how regional conflicts will be handled, since for the central pole of their empire, in this case Russia, to intervene would contravene the hands-off moray of power vis-a-vis the regionalisms. Nations would come to war, they would vie to conquer each other's territory and peoples, and so to maintain the solidarity of the Eurasian Empire would necessitate centralized intervention. We might also add that, as Charles Upton points out in Dugin Against Dugin, his quote-unquote multipolar worldview is a contradiction, considering he wishes to wipe out every other pole of global power, such as the quote-unquote unipolar Atlanticist regime. Again, the nature of power is to grow and to become more central and less regional. The nature of human political relationships is to come into conflict owing to natural human difference. And this makes global political unification and world peace impossible, according to Schmidt in his essay, Unity of the World. I have no reason to suspect that a Eurasian, multi-ethnic approach would not just collapse into the same thing as the UN or the EU, centralized global power that mixes peoples together like an artist with a palette. It must obey the laws of power, just like every global regime.